Hey everybody, I'm Ryan Doyle, and today we're trying something a little bit different. We're actually trying a couple things that are different. I was considering streaming this, but I don't know if this is going to work out to be something that you actually end up viewing. It's worth watching, it's valuable. So I figured, hey, let's maybe scale back how many different layers of new whatever processes I envelop here in this take. So here's the situation. My players last week wandered off. I gave them three options. They chose a fourth that I didn't actually realize I had given them. It was more of like a foreshadowing, thinking a couple steps ahead. And so it goes, if you don't want your players to head in a direction, to choose a path that you are unprepared to run, don't give it to them. That's it. I have built the sandbox. I want to create a very open world feeling. And so I try to have three established things in mind, ready to rock any given night. And they turned and went to a fourth and started wandering through the map. Now, the good thing was the fourth option that I didn't consider them taking just yet was far away, which means out come the encounter tables. And at every opportunity, they chose the most challenging, difficult path, and wandered off into unestablished, not unestablished. I was prepared for it, thankfully, but they went to where I was unprepared to take them because they're level 2, level 3, and they constantly chose the hard road. So it goes. Good for them. And they mostly survived. One character died. Cool. Shambling mound. Got him. Level 2 halfling. Sorry about it. I actually met that person for the first time that night. It's nice to meet you. Sorry I killed you. It was a good time had by all. But here we are. They are in the Scaly Swamp. They are level 2 or 3, and I'm going to take the Scaly Swamp, which is the encounter table up on my Patreon right now, and built to make it easy to wander into the wilderness and create random encounters that are meaningful and to foster this emergent sense of play. And if you don't know what I mean by that, because it's kind of a word that gets thrown around a lot, emergent means to me that the world is alive and the game is alive and is happening there at the table, right? We're figuring it out live. Sometimes in adventure modules, you are working in a way that A leads to B leads to C in a very linear path, railroad, right? Tracks are laid, and that can be good. I'm not disparaging that way of doing things. It's just that's the assumed way of doing things, and I like to have variety. So I like to have a railroad or several railroads running through my sandbox so you can get off the rails and wander. And that's what these encounter tables are for, and I love having them so that my players can pick a road and travel southwest instead of going, northeast, and I have content ready for them and exciting things happened, and I was as surprised and delighted as my players, maybe more surprised and delighted in some cases than my players, because I did not know that they were going to stumble upon the troll tracks in the forest, first of all, and then decide to follow those tracks. And then the troll rolled a nat 1 on perception, so they got the drop on him, sleeping in his cabin beside the bridge, his hovel, his hut, and they kind of tried to talk to him, but they didn't speak giant. And then through a series of charades, they figured out that this guy wanted their money, their gold, their coin purse, and that didn't fly, and a fight ensued, and yada, yada, yada. They crossed the bridge after defeating the troll and taking his treasure and bag of teeth and a couple trinkets I rolled. And they had the option of going into the webbed wood, the higher road, or down into the Scaly Swamp. And they picked the swamp, which in my mind was probably more difficult. There's some nasty stuff in the webbed wood, but you get into trouble faster in the Scaled Swamp. And they rolled, I want to say, a 4, and they pulled the Will-O-Wisps, which lured the players to the Shambling Mound. Now, they actually burned the wisps down fairly quickly, which is challenging for, again, level 3 players with a couple level 2 players, characters, I should say, and the the wisps died just as they reached the rod sticking out of the mound's head, which they were going to shock with lightning. The last wisp actually dashed to get there and didn't have an action and got taken down. But for good or ill, the player who later died shot that hill of plant material that I described with an arrow, and that got its attention, and yada yada yada. One dead character later, dead shambling mound, a ton of experience points. My players are now in the scaly swamp, so I want to put something more formulaic right in front of them. I want something a little more structured. I don't want to rely on the table too much. They're a little out of their element here. I have a lot of things prepared on the other side of the map. They could just, explore the scaly swamp and story will emerge, but I want to put them into a dungeon, essentially. I want to build a dungeon today, and that's what we're doing using the DMG, which is a thing I actually haven't done before, rolling on the Appendix A, the random dungeon tables, to completely make a dungeon. I've leafed through it, gotten ideas, adapted, and honestly, that's probably to a degree what's going to happen here. But I think as like a first draft, I have the Dungeon Master's Guide beside me. I got my laptop hooked up to Dungeon Scrawl, which is a very simple, clean, free, basic user interface for making maps. This is probably going to happen with terrain on a table tonight. I don't need a big, beautiful map. I need something quick here that I can show you, right? Honestly, if I was doing this myself, I would probably just do this on a piece of paper right now. But that's already difficult to show you, and honestly, I don't draw very well. I'm embarrassed to record me scrawling on a piece of paper, so here we go. Dungeon Scrawl, Dungeon Master's Guide, bag full of dice, of course, one of my bags full of dice, a cup of tea. Cheers. And we are off to make a dungeon. Let's start rolling some dice. All right, I'm gonna roll a D10. I'm gonna roll it on the book so you can see it. Ba-ba-bum. The problem with rolling on a book is that was cocked. That's a 4. A rectangle 80 by 20 with rows of pillars down the middle, 2 passages leading from each long wall, doors on each short wall. Cool, so already we've got a lot. Okay, so let me doodle. I'm gonna use this one. Yep. And what did I just say? 80 by 20, correct? Number 4 is an 80 by 20 rectangle. So we'll call these 5-foot squares, right? Yeah. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Ooh, I might have to zoom out already. 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. Now, it's funny. In your mind, this might have been the other way. Ooh, I started on a half step. The one thing about Dungeon Scrawl is that there are half steps. I could go turn that off, but again, I don't really care this time because this is just for me. The players are never going to see this. So here, boom, is the entrance to our temple. I think this is actually an abandoned temple that is now a Black Dragon Wormling's lair, and that is my introduction to D&D encounter design, location design, especially dungeon design. This place was this at some point in the far distant past, because D&D, as much as it's like a medieval fantasy setting, is also a post-apocalyptic setting. There's all this material, all of these places buried essentially beneath layers and layers of soil. Like in our world, archaeological sites are underground. They're filled with dirt and typically not filled with traps and monsters, but cheers. So let's put our doors on this temple entrance. And I like that actually that we get a big grandiose filled with columns entrance here, because this was a temple and a young Black Dragon Wormling is setting up shop in here, but these are wormlings still, so the entirety of the place is not under its control by any means. I'm hoping that there's a way out, and I might just stick one in. The dragons coming and going from perhaps underwater, because this is a swamp and they are amphibious. They are in the final room. Maybe, I don't know how linear this is going to come out, we'll see. But the dragon is in one room. We'll see what's populating the others here. I'm not going to draw the pillars. 2 passages leading from each long wall, doors on each short wall. So here's a door. Bum bum. Here's a door. Are one of these our front door? Yes, I think so. There we go. It's not pretty. You know what? No. I don't know why, but this is drawn this way. This is my front door. Boom, boom. And now let's figure out what this new passage looks like. Passage is a D20. Let's remove this. We have an 8. Straight for 20 feet, side passage to the left, then an additional 10 feet ahead. And I'm going to roll this 20 again. No, this is a 5-foot passage. Let's not get fancy. I don't want to draw a 40-foot width passage right now. I'm going to draw a 5-foot passage coming off of this. Now, just a weird dungeon scroll thing. I want to make sure that I start inside. Let's make this a 10-foot. All right, so that's, we'll call that 2. 3. We want it to be 6.5. Okay, so that is a 30-foot passage. Boom, boom. And there is a door. There's a side passage to the left. And then another 10 feet. So they're making a point where I edit this down because I don't want to make a huge place, and already I've got the implication of 5 rooms. So maybe we leave it at this, see what we get. Let us make some chambers. D20, that is a 30 by 30 square. So let's make this room 30 by 30. And this is boring, and we might edit it and fast forward it. But this is just the basics. And it's, I don't know, it's fun for me. It's fun for the person doing it to have the dice essentially draw a map for you. What am I looking at here? A circle with a 50-foot diameter. And this, I believe, is going to be where our dragon is. And our dragon can swim, and our dragon can fly. So either it's been coming and going through the ceiling, or it's been coming and going through some subterranean waterway, some swampy quagmire, which honestly is going to be my preference. Here's a question. Is there a door here? And I'm going to say no. I'm going to say no. I'm going to say that this is a straight shot to the circular room. And I'm imagining a big vaulted ceiling, like a dome, perhaps. Because again, this was a temple. It's hard to talk and count. 5, 10, 15, 20, 25. So that should do it. And just to be safe, I'm going to gobble up Yeah. And again, no one's ever going to see this. You are seeing it, which I'm having second thoughts about showing it, but this is just for me to run tonight. Sometimes you need or want a beautiful, fancy map. You're playing online. You want to increase the engagement with the players who are maybe, looking at other tabs on their laptop or, playing on their phone. So, yeah, a beautiful map is more engaging in those circumstances. But sometimes I have a very powerful imagination, and that's not a brag, but I enjoy and have a lot of practice visualizing things in my mind. So oftentimes the thing that my mind makes image-wise is going to be, for me, cooler, much better than the static image on the screen. That's not true for everybody, and is a thing that I have to remind myself of often. A bunch of different kinds of people playing this game, and you are going to find, one, what works for you, and two, what works for your players. And I think you're going to find with, 3, 4, 5, 6 people sitting around the table that some things are going to work very well for some of your players, and different things are going to work for others. So I'm a big proponent of variety, trying new things in a lot of areas of life. Let's roll one more time. Boop. That is a 6. 6 is going to give us a 40 by 40 square. Now here's a question. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now, I'm going to put that here. Am I going to regret this? Maybe. But let's be decisive, huh? Whoops. Not a circle. Nope. And again, I like this little, this facade here to the temple. So I'm going to set it back again. And we're going 40 by 40. And it is very handy that it tells you what you got. So there's a 30 by 30 over here, there's a 40 by 40 over here. This, I'm going to roll for, but it's pretty obvious what's going on here. And I don't care what the dice say. The fact that this exists and this hole exists suggests to me something would be here. And I think that's where we're going to put our secret door, because every good dungeon has a secret door, right? And rules are meant to be broken. But let's roll the dice. Let's see if we get it. Are there like side passages here? 17 is another big old circle. Yeah, we got 17 again. Okay, so we are going to build us a little room here. And maybe this is like a little chapel-y place. Maybe this is a room where the clerics would get dressed in their vestries. Who knows? The dice are going to tell us all of that. But because of this here, there's got to be something here, right? The players are going to think so. The players are going to be disappointed if they don't find something here. And it doesn't have to be something everywhere there's a hole. But, boom. In my world, there's something there. And again, this cross-hatching here makes it, and this no, not the shadow as much. The way this works makes it very hard if I were playing online to show the players this and not completely give away the secret door. But the fact that I am the only person who's going to see this map tonight, I don't know why I can't draw doors anymore. If I were going to show people this, I would make this a different color. And we're going to put, you know what? We're going to start putting text here. S. That's tiny, isn't it? Okay, close enough, good enough for me. Now let's get into the interesting stuff. So that is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, counting the passageways, rooms. That is perfect for what I'm looking for. There's a template, the 5-room dungeon. Very popular. I may make a video about it, but it's basically the entrance, guardian, a NPC, basically a RP moment that comes after the fight if you're going to go, railroad, a setback, which is often a trap in my mind, but is oftentimes it's like a gotcha-y thing that I don't love that, but like a trap or a puzzle. And then there is the climax is the 4th one, actually, the big boss battle, and then the treasure room, right? Nice little quick recipe to vary upon, but that will take you very far. Now, 7 feels a little more like a full day's adventuring to me most of the time. Some of these rooms may be empty, we'll see. But that 5-room dungeon by, oh boy, John, what's your last name? I subscribe to your newsletter. It's very good. I'll put a link down below if this sees the light of day. John 4. What's the John for? So again, when I make a dungeon, I try to make it 2 things, right? And we talked about that first post-apocalyptic lair. This was a temple. Now it's a lair, and it's a poorly established lair at that. I don't think that the dragon controls the majority of the space, honestly. I think that this big circle is the dragon's lair. It's a wormling, it's a baby. So it's living in there, but other things are living in here as well, because that makes it fun. So where is Temple or Shrine? Here we go. D100. D100. So the interesting thing about my D100 is that they're made of metal. If you're a dungeon master and you're a dice goblin, get yourself 1 set of metal dice, because sometimes that sound will get your player's attention, but they're going to get conditioned to that sound, and maybe you're not playing on a wooden table that's super resonant. But the difference between and in a serious moment, that was a 3, by the way, and this was a 1, so maybe I'm supposed to edit this out, I don't know. Metal dice, pretty cool. 64, Temple or Shrine. 64 is going to be a library well stocked with religious treatises. So, if I were going to place a library in this temple, I don't think it would be the secret room. I think it's going to be the smaller of these wings, because people coming here would come in to worship, right? This, in my imagination, already has the statue to the god, and there's a couple contenders for that. My warlock's patron, perhaps, or the evil deity of the cult that is, percolating throughout my campaign, or the sun god is always the old standby for me. Call him what you will, the Dawn Father, Pelor. He is often the lawful, good god that, like, maybe your paladin is going to fall in line behind, but for the most part is there as a symbol. And historically, sun gods were often, occasionally, if not often, violent, right? You want to make a sacrifice to something, the sun is a contender. All right. Is this interesting? Is this boring? Let me know in the comments, because again, I'm thinking about doing this live, where I can actually interact with other human beings. Library. I think I've zoomed way the heck out is part of the reason. that this is so hard to read, but this is the library. And I love that because, and granted, this is going to be something else too. This is a buried temple. There's probably a lot of disarray, to put it mildly, beyond mildew and moss. This is a lost temple, half sunk in a swamp. So there's not going to be a ton of recoverable material here. But what we may find here is lore drops, scrolls, spell books, maps, tons of potential in a library. I'm going to plant a bunch of plot seeds and potential rewards in this place. We're also probably going to have some kind of monster here. Let's populate the rest of the rooms from the temple side of things, and then we will take a look at who's here now. That is 30. Classroom used to train initiates and priests. Okay, so we're getting a very scholarly... Whoops. We're getting a very scholarly kind of vibe here. So yeah, now maybe we're talking the god of knowledge, the god of prophecy. That has a ton of potential, you know, Savras or whoever else. The second you bring that sort of stuff in, divination, we're talking visions maybe, another great plot hook delivery system, all sorts of good stuff. So this is going to be the classroom. And again, if I were making a map to share online or whatever, I would go put furniture and all sorts of stuff in here. But I'm just going to be describing this to my players, building the terrain as we go, because one of my players is awesome and has a whole collection of material he 3D prints, and it's cool to build it on the fly. Honestly, I'm enjoying that. That's not a way I've played before. 62, I think, might give me the same result, which I might change. Library, yeah. I mean, that secret room, if nothing else comes up that I find more interesting, could be the super secret library, for sure. 84, trophy room, where art celebrating key figures and events from mythology is displayed. We're going to put a pin in that because my impulse is to make the Dragon's Lair, the big circular room, the trophy room. Panels of murals on the walls, which if you've ever seen in a big curving space, where was I that I saw that? Some battlefield? I'm not sure. Is that Gettysburg? That could be cool. If not, then like maybe the secret room is the trophy room. Some magic item, perhaps, taken off of an evil deity or cult, or reverse it. If this is the evil god spot, then like taking off the good guys. And what is good and evil when you get down to it? Crypt for a high priest or similar figure, hidden and heavily guarded by creatures and traps. Oh boy, that's my secret room, right? A trapped secret door with some undead guardian or construct. And we're going to call this the priest's tomb. What? I did the SpongeBob. Angry texts. Priests. Tomb. Did I spell it right the first time? I don't know. Definitely spelled it wrong the second time, though. Okay. Man, that's exciting. That's exciting. I like that a lot already. One more time. Is this big rotunda our trophy room, or is it the guard room? this is the guard room for sure, right? This little passageway here. This is where the temple guardians sleep, muster. Maybe it's like a locker room, you know? They're not necessarily living in this space because it is a fairly small space. Guard room. But we would find, I almost typed out what I was speaking. Guard room. Maybe a single bunk, but you'd say guard room, and I think there's weapons and perhaps even armor in here. Is it recoverable? Depends. Is something living in there? Because that's the one tightest, smallest place? Probably. Okay, where are we putting the trophies, or what else are we putting in the dungeon, the dragon's lair? 14, cells where the faithful can sit in quiet contemplation. That would have been the tiny room, right? Or I could add to this, or we could combine those ideas, which doesn't really feel natural, but if there's a bunch of little alcoves in this big rotunda, or benches, right? I'm getting a real museum-y feel from this idea of like a trophy room, right? So this is the dragon's lair now, and it's an obvious place for a dragon to want to start setting up shop and building their hoard. I don't know how canonically interested in art black dragons are. Trophy room with niches for quiet contemplation. And again, this is also just a first draft. I can change any of this, whether at the table in a matter of hours or afterwards, right? Because I'm going to run this tonight, I think, depending on what my players decide to do. And I am going to polish it up and put it on the Patreon. I'm going to put it on for everybody because this is a little slapdash. But before that happens, before I share this with the world in a downloadable way, you are going to... You're not going to watch me do it, I don't think. But I am going to go through and revise this probably a couple times. Whatever creative project you're working on, given the ability and the time to do it, quick, rough draft, dirty, maybe with a generative process that gets you out of your own way. So things that you might not have automatically come up with happen, right? Like, I don't think I would have built this space if I were doodling right now. And then put it away, come back to it with a fresh set of eyes, and your mind will probably make more new connections. Maybe there's some things that are difficult that you didn't see. There's this old writers saying I actually know a couple, but there are no good writers. There are only good editors. So feel free to give yourself permission to create a crappy first draft and then go in and make it better. But if you don't have anything, you can't improve upon it. So I'm going to roll on the layer table as well, even though I might decide not to use any of this. But this is the layer, so for the entrance, maybe 3. Banquet room for important celebrations. Now, to me, that brings to mind feasting monsters, which in this case are probably lizard folk. I know there's lizard folk in here. I know there's lizard folk in the swamp. I think we walk in on lizard folk feast. That's interesting because it raises a few questions right away. One, what are they eating? One A, is it dead yet? If they're eating a giant snake or spider or toad. Ooh boy, do I love giant toads. You could throw that in the mix as well. Maybe the players free it and create some complications for our lizard folk here. Maybe they end up fighting the lizard folk and then the thing that they were going to eat, or there's a three-way fight, which can be fun sometimes. But maybe they walk in, negotiate, play nice, break bread with these lizard folk, change the tone of this whole thing. The one potential pitfall for this like 5-room dungeon idea is that this entrance guardian fight could also be the roleplay opportunity and could happen in the same location where the puzzle or setback is occurring, because you want to spice up a combat, man, put a trap on the table at the same time. And now position matters. Grapple and dragging and shoving might happen in a place where there's a pit trap, and I can do way more damage pushing you 5 feet than I can hitting you with a sword or whatever. Okay. All right, so far so good. What's going on in our... Let's do the library first. Off the table, but it was an 18. I'm going to take it, I think. 18, see? 18... Trophy room or museum. So we're doubling down. I'm going to just keep the trophy room. But there's another layer of trophies here, right? There's what these priests, clerics, whatever, the original denizens of this temple put here that has survived, right? I imagine most of it has decayed or been looted, but there is another layer on top of these beautiful, maybe tile mosaics on the walls. There are the trophies that a black dragon wormling, Sour Breath, has brought here, which, I mean, bones, right? I mean, what would a dragon... Well, maybe there's magical treasure in the mix from the Alchemist, 17. So maybe this is our library. Training and exercise room. Training and exercise room. That's a very particular thing that I would not have considered, but I'm going to put that in the classroom, and that's definitely the lizard folk. That is not, that's an organized humanoid activity. Training. Lizard folk training. So the reason I'm hemming and hawing here, I should describe my thought process, right? That's the whole idea. The lizard folk live somewhere else, and that is where I imagine they would be teaching their young or training. And that's the kind of thing, these little incongruous suggestions, little nuggets of information that don't quite fit immediately, can be that like little grit of sand that like a pearl forms around in your brain. And I didn't make that up. That's a popular metaphor, but I'm getting credit for it now because I can't remember who said it originally. It was probably some 17th century poet. Training and exercise. But this is the kind of thing that maybe I am going to the gym again for the first time in a long time, right? Since COVID, but I still can't spell exercise. It's been so long since I've done it. I can't even write the word. So that's the kind of thing. One, hopefully, maybe, there is a bolt of inspiration that strikes me tonight. And honestly, all else fails if I don't come up with anything. The lizard folk are in there doing jumping jacks, getting ready, training. So the story is that these lizard folk are bringing offerings to this black dragon, but don't quite serve it yet. It's a wormling. It's not super strong. They don't want to upset it. And they have found this alchemist's hut, basically on stilts out in the swamp. That alchemist trying to cure the disease, which is going to come in here somewhere, maybe. That unfortunately befell the alchemist, created the now deceased swamp thing, shambling mound. And they are bringing this dragon an offering that they've looted from that place. And maybe they're in there talking about it. Maybe they set up shop in the classroom and they're feasting out in the entrance hall. Because you don't cook where you sleep, right? Especially if you're cooking over an open fire. I mean, you can, especially if it's cold. But, okay. If nothing else, that's what's up there. And lizard folk are militant? That doesn't quite feel right. They're not militant in my world. Like, orcs are militant, but they would absolutely be ready for anything and staying fit. And maybe they're just sparring in there. Okay, let's roll for the library. 7. Cistern or well for drinking water. Now, I'm going to interpret that there's water in here. Is it potable? Depends what you are. Are you a lizard person who lives in the swamp? Sure, you could drink it. But I'm going to say this is flooded. That makes it even more special if and when we discover a salvageable scroll or document in there. And in fact, a piece of parchment that has been infused with magic is more likely to survive. Okay, couple more rolls here. Is the guard room anything? Also maybe flooded? I don't know. 16. Torture chamber. Ooh boy. Yeah, I mean, okay. That could be a couple things. You know, torture is one of those things that I bring up in a session 0, right? Lines and veils. And like, honestly, for me, part of it is like, I don't want to RP, a monster being tortured, right? And like, I don't want to spend a ton of time getting into it, right? You ever been in that game? I mean, maybe you enjoy this, but like, D&D is a very violent thing, right? It's all about killing and fighting monsters and doing damage. But, you know, there's sometimes, and it's usually a guy, who's like a little too into it. So, whatever. Maybe there's just weapons in that room, or maybe it's kind of like that, like, self-flagellation, ritualistic, religious torture vibe. Okay, we're going to take a timeout at torture. Hit pause on all of this because Dolly has to go outside. BRB. And we're back. Dolly took a little walk. We took a little walk. She refuses to hang out with me and be exploited for views and subscriptions. Hey, like and subscribe if you're still watching. And I have decided to switch gears a little bit. My intention was to go through the rest of this and put in furniture and maybe some general dungeon chambers to assign some things and maybe the current state of the chambers, but a lot of this stuff I've already filled in. I might have gone and rolled some traps for our setback, the quality of the doors, right? How hard is it to open up that secret door? Is there some random like hazard, mold, slime? Like these are things that could definitely be here. But I've decided, because I know so much about this place already, I'm not just starting from pure scratch working in the void. I went to the Scaly Swamp because that's where we are. There's a lot of material in there that I want to incorporate into this game already. We might find all of these elements outside of here instead or as well, but I took that stuff and used it to populate this. And these encounter tables that I am building, I want to make sure that you understand, are not just there for the moment where, oh, I don't know what to do while I'm running the game and I'm going to reach for a random encounter. They're awesome for that. I used them for 3 hours for that. I filled up a session using them that way, and we had a lot of fun. But they are also these little boxes filled with Legos, filled with building blocks, and a bunch of weird little specialty pieces in there that you can, the control panel that only sticks on a certain way. There's all sorts of cool bricks in there. And as much as I can, I make it so that they snap together in a bunch of different interesting ways. So you can take all of that material, grab a little map off the internet, or build one rolling on this, or steal this one that I just made. Not that it's amazing, but you can totally have this, and use it to populate these rooms, turn it into a dungeon very easily. If I gave you a dungeon and said, hey, you can also use these all as like random encounters, that's true, but at least the way my mind works, it's harder to get there. It's much easier to say, like, what goes here from this big box of building blocks and one of those ground pieces of Legos. I don't know. I'm losing this metaphor. But the box of toys is easier to fit into these places than it is, in my mind, to extract these things and then rearrange them somewhere else. Also, I build those tables in a way that you can randomly generate all of this content. So I could have rolled on the Scaly Swamp to populate all of these places. And maybe I should have, but like I've already formed connections in my mind. And that's the other thing. Any of these tables where, the dice can tell you what goes where, what's happening to whom, you can also just make a decision. You can pick one off the list. You can also do both. A lot of the time, I will roll, and I don't like the result, and sometimes I'll roll again, sometimes I'll just roll with it and make it fit, but more often than not, I'll find another result right by there, and I was like, you know what, this fits the tone, this fits the pacing, this, is different than the last thing that just happened enough that that's the one I want, and that is okay. No one's going to know that you're doing that, and it's expected of you. So we are talking about this entrance where the lizard folk are feasting. So I took one of the encounters off of the Scaly Swamp. 8 lizard folk eating giant spiders. Boom. They, I believe, have that javelin of lightning too, which is their offering to Sour Breath. Great. So I'm not even going to write that down. I'm going to write that on the little index card. That's fine. That's perfect for me. The classroom, I took another of those lizard folk encounters, and it's 4 lizard folk and 4 giant lizards, and it is the lizards that are being trained. And that makes sense to my mind. They are semi-domesticated, and you better believe if there's a fight that maybe they join in, and probably on the side of the lizard folk. Now, the way things are arranged on the map here, let me get my cursor out of the way, the way things might go down if we fight these lizard folk in this giant hall entranceway with, I imagine, very tall ceilings made out of stone, very echoey. If it comes to blows, the rest of the lizard folk troop in the classroom may join in that battle, right? And I'm a big proponent of waves of enemies, and realistic is maybe not the right word, but believable consequences to player actions. Because again, I'm leaving the door open. They can negotiate with the lizard folk, right? They're here for the dragon, the players, and the lizard folk. And the lizard folk are ambivalent a little bit about serving anybody, but it seems like an inevitability. This Sour Breath is soon to be a young black dragon, and that changes things quite a bit. So right now they're just appeasing it, but it will quickly become the shot caller in this swamp. So the lizard folk could be persuaded to look the other way. I don't think they're going to attack this dragon, but they might let the adventurers pass on through. And will they ask for tribute in return? Will they ask for payment? Will they ask for promises? We'll see what I decide and what the dice say in the moment. But that medium fight of 8 lizard folk versus probably 4. We'll see who shows up. Maybe 5 players at level 2, level 3 could become pretty deadly if those numbers double. And I might stagger that, right? A 6-second round probably isn't enough time to get up and run and help your friends, but it might take a beat for the lizard folk in the classroom to get on their lizards, decide to come fight, and to do so. Cool. So the library I'm very excited about. Since we got that cistern, I believe was the answer that came up on the dice, but it's flooded. And that lets me bring in all these other elements of the swamp, right? So the quagmire, wherein stepping in it, right? And it's going to be deeper than you think, right? This is halfway to a trap. Constitution save against sight rot, which is in the basic rules as well as other places, but it's something I did not know existed until I was really researching this. There's a couple cool diseases on there, and disease is not something I reach for often. So sight rot, ooh, good one, nasty. If you're not careful, you may contract that. I'm also putting the swarm of insects in that room as well. Again, that bite is going to trigger a constitution saving throw where you might contract this disease. I also am going to create a little document, I don't know how involved I'm going to get considering I have only hours to do it in, of the table of the flora that you may find on this swamp. I'm going to put a little herbalist kit, perhaps, and the document describing the local flora and their uses here, right? This is a temple where there was a lot of learning going on. Granted, the environment may have changed since this temple was here, but your players are not looking as closely as you are at all of the details. So yeah, there's a document in here. Here's all the things that are in the swamp. And that might just be flavorful fluff that no one really pays attention to, but that also might be the thing that the players go looking for immediately or next time, right? Go find the magical plant in the swamp is a plot hook. That's a quest right there. Particularly if it's go find the magical plant in the swamp that's teeming with exotic life and monsters because your companion has been struck blind by this weird disease. That's a quest. Boom. Awesome. So we are going to take Krath the Trader, who is a more sophisticated lizard folk and an NPC more than a monster. And he's in that guard room going through these implements, right? Because he is more interested in trade than your typical lizard folk would be. Backstory, he's had more contact with the civilized races, which is maybe a little icky, but whatever, other more commerce-oriented species outside of this swamp. So will want to negotiate, will want to talk, is not going to fight, especially if all of his companions have been slaughtered already, right? He would be aware in that little room. He's probably trying to ride it out inside of there. If things come to blows, he might want to trade. And yeah, if here's an NPC by themselves that has something the players want, that can be a death sentence for that NPC, and it might go that way. But an NPC who can continue to supply magical items, and at this point, we've been playing 3 or 4 sessions, the players already have more gold than they know what to do with. Someone's saving up to buy plate, the majority of the table has more gold than they know what to do with. You can't walk into the magic item store in this frontier town. There's no such thing. So somebody like Krath, who has knowledge and the capability, at least he's going to say that he does, to provide more magical items should he just survive this encounter. That's going to be an interesting roleplay opportunity, and now I got to come up with his voice. The priest's tomb is secret, is sealed, is not part of this current timeline, is part of the past. So the details of that are going to be more specific to my campaign. The god here is tied up with imprisoning the patron of the Warlock. So yeah, long story short, couple ghouls as sworn protectors of this sacred tomb, and then either the ghost of this priest or an inscription laying out just more details of what's going on in here, plus treasure that translates into gold. I'm a big fan of gems. So they're flavorful art objects sometimes, but I think maybe like a couple roll on the gem table is 100, 200 gold pieces worth of treasure entombed with this priest. Is it entombed in the form of a giant sarcophagus that is complex to extract from this swamp miles from anywhere? Maybe. We'll see how the night's going. And now the trophy room, again, more descriptive panels of what is happening in the larger context of the world. Just a little peek behind the curtain. The third adventure, the Temple of, I always want to say Quetzalcoatl or Teotihuacan or whatever, the third adventure in Tales from the Yawning Portal is probably in this swamp, but I don't want to tell them that because they might go there and then they'll all die at level 3. Right? So it's good to have an eye on what's coming up in 3 levels, 4 levels, but that's probably months away. You don't, one, want to get too excited about it as the Dungeon Master to take the shine off of the lower level and potentially less interesting stuff at a certain point that you are having to prepare for and run right now. And 2, yeah, if you expect them to get there at level 6, don't build all of the path to get there. Because again, I'm in this situation because I hinted at something that might happen in another couple sessions, and we already fast forwarded to here. So we have our young black dragon in this room with these murals speaking of the grand battle between the gods that has yada yada yada. And there's also, I think, a giant snakeskin in here. I'm going to say the bones of maybe a giant toad or some other creature. Some small amount of treasure. He does have a lantern. I would double check, but I believe it is a lantern that casts light, a very simplistic magic item. I might spice it up a little bit more now that it's more dungeon-y context. But yeah, that's it. That's a night's worth of content from rolling a couple dice and connecting some dots. I hope this was entertaining. I would like to do this in a more collective way, maybe in the future, where I'm taking input from you, and whether that is live on stream if I improve my setup a little bit, and hey, support my Patreon in the meantime if you feel like it. The Verdigris Table has to start funding itself, so Patreon is going to be a huge cornerstone in that process. So if you can participate in that, again, deeply appreciate it. Even if you're not contributing, this will be up there for free when it's fully baked. By the time you see this video, it's up there. So go grab this if this is interesting to you. The Scaly Swamp is for patrons only, but this will be there for you. And you can fill this place up with whatever you want. Or throw this out, grab the DMG, grab a map on the internet, rock and roll. Thank you so much for watching this far. Appreciate you. Be kind, have fun, and I'll see you next time.